Jackson, Wyoming. This woman believes she can answer humanity's greatest question: is there life after death? 15 years ago, Mary Neal drowned, and she believes that she died, visited heaven, and was sent back.
The colors were so intense, far more intense than anything we experience here, and it was every color of the rainbow and beyond, all at the same time.
Did Mary really die and visit heaven? Or will science explain that it was all in her imagination? Thousands of people worldwide claimed to have glimpsed the afterlife. But what makes Mary Neal's testimony so interesting is that she is a scientist who has examined all the evidence, and she may have proof that the afterlife is real.
I had to conclude that my experience was beyond the boundaries of science and beyond the boundaries of medicine.
Dr. Mary Neal has been an orthopedic surgeon for 25 years and deals with traumatic injuries every day.
I certainly had patients who were very gravely ill, patients who died, patients who had cardiac arrests. So I certainly have been around death.
But nothing prepared her for the experience she had 15 years ago, something so extraordinary that it changed her life forever. In 1999, Mary went to southern Chile on a kayaking trip with friends.
Chile has a huge variety of whitewater, anything from the hardest, Class 6, like a Niagara Falls, to just an easy float that you might do in a canoe.
On the last day of the trip, Mary joined up with Chad and his family. They were kayaking through a whitewater section of the river that included 15 and 20-foot waterfalls.
Drops of that size are certainly challenging and exhilarating, but they were well within our skill set. We came to the first major drop and pulled to the side of the river in a little eddy, and we had decided that we would run this sort of smaller drop rather than the main part of the waterfall.
But as Mary got closer to the first waterfall, things went horribly wrong. The smaller drop was blocked, and it was too late to avoid the huge drop.
I had to veer over and go over the main part of the waterfall. And I could see tremendous turbulence and really violent churning of the water. And I looked at the bottom and I thought, well, this is not going to turn out well.
The pounding water pushed Mary and her kayak under the surface, and she became lodged against a rock.
Initially, I didn't know who was missing. I thought we were looking, just to make sure that we were clear. But my dad kept saying, we have to find Mary, we have to find Mary, we have to find Mary.
Mary was drowning, and her friends had no idea where she was. Completely submerged, she couldn't escape and was minutes away from her last breath. But she was about to go on what she calls a miraculous journey through death and beyond. In 1999, southern Chile, Dr. Mary Neal was fighting for her life. And her friends raced to rescue her.
We could see an outline of the boat. We could see some of the boat. I never had a clarity of her location other than my dad saying, she's still there, she's still there, she's still stuck. Boys, you have to get her, you have to get her.
With her lungs filling with water, Mary says a strange feeling of peacefulness suddenly came over her.
I asked for God's will to be done and absolutely gave up trying to control the outcome. In the moment I asked that, I was immediately overcome with a very physical sensation of being held and comforted and reassured that everything was fine. I felt more alive than I'd ever felt.
At this moment, Mary believes she felt herself crossing from this life into the next.
And I could feel my spirit peeling away from my boat, and I rose up and out of the river. And even as I was rising up and out of the river, I could feel the water draining off of me, and I could feel this glorious sunshine.
Mary believes that she visited heaven.
The colors were so intense, far more intense than anything we experience here. It was as though I could not only see the colors, but I could hear them and feel them and smell them and experience them. I mean, I knew that I was home. It was as though I had a complete understanding of everything, of how everything works.
What Dr. Mary Neal had, we've seen in hundreds and hundreds of near-death experiences. They encounter what is described as universal knowledge. They may have a sense of knowing everything in the universe, how it all fits together, things that they couldn't possibly have known in their earthly life. It's like trying to put an ocean of knowledge into the teacup of the human brain.
Mary had been underwater for 10 minutes, and Chad's hopes of rescuing her were fading fast.
We failed multiple times, swept downstream, swim back up, re-access. I remember at one point I was straddling two rocks and I was able to touch the front of her boat, and I remember thinking to myself, like, this is it.
Finally, Chad managed to dislodge Mary's kayak, but as the current grabbed it, Mary's legs were broken. Her limp body was pulled free from the boat, but tumbled downstream. She would have completely vanished, but Chad spotted her life jacket bobbing to the surface.
And so I dove from where I was downstream to go retrieve that, and then encountered Mary in the water. Well, it was a miraculous miracle. I mean, that's the only other way for it.
But Chad feared he was too late.
We get her up onto a flattish rock and we check for a pulse, and there is no pulse. We listen to her breathing, there is no breathing. Her chest isn't moving, her body is waxy. There is no circulation at all.
Did Mary really experience the afterlife and heaven? In the mountains of southern Chile, Dr. Mary Neal had been trapped underwater for over 10 minutes after a kayaking trip went terribly wrong.
I knew that she had died before we got her to shore, before we gave her compressions, before we checked her pulse. We knew she had died.
While Chad fought to save her life, Mary believes today that she was in heaven the whole time and witnessed something extraordinary. She says she looked down at her own body on Earth. Dr. Long has spent 15 years collecting thousands of afterlife testimonials from around the world.
About 45% of people that have a near-death experience, their consciousness separates from the body, and from that vantage point, typically over their body, they may be able to see and hear their ongoing frantic resuscitation efforts. They may be unconscious or clinically dead, and yet what they saw and heard was absolutely accurate, even down to fine details.
I watched as he pulled me over to the shore, and I watched as they started CPR. And I recognized my body. I recognized that it represented my life here on Earth. It represented my husband, my children. And I had all the reason to come back.
But Mary says what she saw of the afterlife made her want to stay.
I was immediately greeted by a group of people, spirits, beings. I'm never really quite sure what to call them. They were absolutely overjoyed to welcome me and greet me and love me. And I knew that I'd known them as long as I had existed.
But the familiar voice of Chad kept floating into her consciousness. He wasn't going to let her go.
I was doing compressions, and so I was talking to her. I was telling her, come back, you know, you have to breathe, that incessant voice for her to come back.
Chad kept calling to me, Mary, I know you're here. Please come back and take a breath. And I would look back at him, and he's one of those guys, he just seemed so vulnerable, and he was so young, and I would be filled with compassion. And I would say, just a minute, I'll be right back. But at a certain point, the people, the spirits who had taken me to this threshold told me that it wasn't my time and that I had more work to do on Earth and that I had to go back to my body.
Mary finally began responding to Chad's persistent CPR.
For me, leaving my body and being reunited was a very smooth transition. And when I regained consciousness, I didn't have pain.
Today, Mary is alive and has a miraculous story to tell. Did she really visit the afterlife? Or is there a scientific explanation for what she saw and felt? In 1999, Dr. Mary Neal was recovering from a kayaking accident, during which she's convinced she died, went to heaven, and miraculously came back to life.
From the time they started the watch to the time they began CPR was 15 minutes on the watch. It's too long to hope to survive, especially without fancy medical care. And it's too long to hope to survive without some fairly profound brain damage.
But when Mary returned home to America, miraculously, she made a full recovery. Did a divine force protect her? Or is there a medical explanation?
Surviving a drowning event, even up to an hour, is very rare, but it certainly is possible.
So the fact that Mary survived being underwater for over 10 minutes is not in itself a miracle.
So when somebody is in drowning in cold water, the body starts slowing down and you get less oxygen consumption by your brain cells and other important organs, especially the heart and lungs, that prolong survivability. We've had cases where incredible survival rates, even if they've been underwater for an hour.
But what about her out-of-body experience? How can that be explained?
There is not a shred of scientific evidence that tells us the brain has been completely shut down or dead during near-death experience. In fact, the brain is orchestrating a cascade of survival reflexes and responses.
According to neurologist Dr. Nelson, during severe trauma, the brain goes into crisis mode, which leads to many of the sensations reported by people such as Mary, including feeling disconnected from their bodies.
It's a very unusual and powerful illusion, but it is not unique to near-death experience, and in fact, it's remarkably common. 1 out of 20 people in the general population will report an out-of-body experience.
In fact, Dr. Nelson can recreate an out-of-body experience in the laboratory. All it takes is an electrical impulse to a particular part of the brain.
If one were to place an electrode in the temporal parietal area, that is right about here, with a flip of a switch, someone can be out of their body, back in their body, at the will of the neurologist.
But what about Mary's visions of heaven? Dr. Nelson says that's another aspect of semi-consciousness that we can all relate to.
is the same brain mechanism that we experience every night of our lives, and that is REM sleep. That's when we do our most vibrant dreaming, and that's what gives the near-death experience its unique quality. The entire visual system is activated, and that causes lights and hallucinations.
What's more, during moments of great danger, like being on the brink of death, our memories become both hyperactive and prone to error. All these brain functions combined make the near-death experience seem supernatural. But Mary Neal doesn't believe the scientific explanation.
I remember the details as precisely and accurately today as if it were happening. It's as though I'm remembering something in the present tense instead of a memory. And that's something that's very, very different from a dream or hallucination. I had to conclude that my experience was beyond the boundaries of science and beyond the boundaries of medicine.
So, is the afterlife real or not? For Dr. Long, perhaps the most convincing evidence lies in the thousands of witness testimonials he's collected over the years.
It seems to make no difference whether you're a Muslim in Egypt or a Hindu in India or a Christian in the United States. No matter where on earth you live, near-death experiences seem to be the same.
Is this evidence of an afterlife, or just confirmation that all humans respond to trauma in the same way? Mary is absolutely sure that what she experienced that day was not a dream, and there may be proof. In heaven, she talked to angels, and they gave her a terrible prophecy, and that prophecy came true. In Jackson, Wyoming, Dr. Mary Neal believes that in 1999 she died and glimpsed the afterlife. During her time in heaven, she says she was given a startling prophecy about her eldest son, Willie. She was told he was going to die.
I woke up every morning wondering if that would be the day. I wasn't told the exact day and hour, and I wasn't told how he would die, but it was very clear that that was going to happen, and not in a natural way.
Mary kept this information from her family until Willie turned 18.
We were at a ski race, and I went to his hotel room at 4 in the morning and said, "Willie." And when he came to the door, of course I started crying, and I told him the entire story.
Then, in 2011, when Willie was 19, the premonition Mary was given during her near-death experience came true.
And the day he died, he was out for a training roller ski, and they came to this overlook, and my son made some comment to the effect of how beautiful it was, and wouldn't this be the perfect last thing to see before you died. And then they took off, and 30 seconds later, he was dead. A car hit him, and he died instantly.
How could Mary have known her son was destined to die young? For Mary, this is proof that she really did visit heaven and talk to angels. In the end, it was her own experience of the afterlife that gave her the strength to cope with her son's death.
I knew that he was going to this wonderful place, and I would be seeing him or experiencing him again at some point in the future. This accident changed my life in a way that I think everyone's life can be changed, because one of the things it did for me was really allow me to give up control and to realize that there really is life after death. there is a bigger picture, a bigger plan, and that there's incredible beauty that comes out of every event.